In July of 1939, a young Lutheran theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer stood in New York City, safe from the rising chaos of Nazi Germany. Friends had helped him escape, offering him refuge from persecution. But within weeks, he made a decision that would seal his fate. He wrote, "I have come to the conclusion that I made a mistake in coming to America. I shall have no right to take part in the restoration of Christian life in Germany after the war, unless I share the trials of this time with my people." That decision to return home was the beginning of Bonhoeffer's ultimate ethical test, a choice between loyalty and compassion. Bonhoeffer had been silenced by the Nazi regime for speaking against its persecution of Jews. He believed that silence in the face of injustice was itself a moral failure. Back in Germany, he joined the underground resistance, a small group trying to stop Hitler. Though he was a devout pacifist, he eventually agreed to help in a plot to assassinate Hitler. Here was his dilemma. Should he stay loyal to his country, his church, and his vow of nonviolence? Or should he act out of compassion and end the suffering of millions, even if it meant betraying those loyalties? For Bonhoeffer, this was not a decision made in self-righteousness, but in anguish. He wrote that he stood on the edge of an abyss. He knew that conspiring to kill was a sin, yet he also knew that if he was to do nothing, it would also be a sin. His theology taught him that sometimes, to follow God's will, one must act responsibly, even if that action breaks traditional moral rules. He believed true faith required free responsibility, the courage to do what compassion demanded, even at the cost of guilt. Bonhoeffer rejected what he called the great masquerade of evil, the idea that obedience, law, or blind loyalty could ever excuse moral failure. He saw that the Nazis had twisted loyalty into a weapon. To him, compassion was not just kindness. It was obedience to God's will. He wrote, "Who stands fast? Only the one for whom the final standard is not his reason, his conscience, or his virtue, but who is ready to sacrifice all of these when called to obedient and responsible action." In other words, he believed that moral purity means nothing if it allows others to suffer. Sometimes, he thought the most moral choice is the one that leaves your hands dirty, but your conscience alive. As he said, it is better to do evil than to be evil. In 1943, after helping 14 Jews escape to Switzerland, Bonhoeffer was arrested by the Gestapo. He spent 2 years in prison, where he wrote letters about faith, suffering, and responsibility. On April 9th, 1945, just days before the camp was liberated, he was executed at Flossenburg concentration camp at the age of 39. His last words were recorded as, "This is the end. For me, the beginning of life." Even as he faced death, Bonhoeffer led his fellow prisoners in communion, an act of compassion that transcended fear, hate, and division. Dietrich Bonhoeffer's life asks us a question that still echoes today. When loyalty and compassion collide, which of those do we choose? His story shows that ethics isn't about following the rules. It's about taking responsibility when those rules fail. He sacrificed his loyalty to the state and even his moral innocence out of compassion for humanity. His life reminds us that sometimes, to stand with love and justice, we must be willing to stand alone.